All right, everybody. Sam Shaw from Wall Street Mastermind here. We will get started here in a couple minutes. Let me just make sure that all of the tech is working as usual. So just give me 1 second. All right, let me make sure that we're on all the platforms. It looks like we're on Facebook. And then let me just check on LinkedIn and YouTube. Make sure we're on there as well. Looks like we're on YouTube. Good stuff. And then let's check LinkedIn. Looks like we're on LinkedIn as well. Okie dokes. Hopefully you guys can hear me. For those of you who can hear me, do me a favor and just drop a comment down below. You guys can hear me? Oops. Yeah, drop a comment down below and just let me know you can hear me. And then we can go ahead and get started. And for those of you who don't know what we're going to be talking about today, basically, we're going to be talking about how you can get more interviews from the top investment banks out there, okay, or the exact same system that our clients are using to get interviews from bulge bracket, elite boutique, and even middle market banks. So cool. Sounds like a couple of you guys are saying you can hear me. Awesome. So let's get started. I had to ask my wife to give me a quick haircut right before this live stream because didn't want to look bad, and my hair's been growing out for over a month. So I was doing that right before this, but I'm ready. So for those of you who are new, again, my name is Sam Shaw. I used to be an investment banker at Morgan Stanley and their technology group, which is one of the best technology investment banking groups and probably one of the best groups overall on Wall Street. Probably a little bit biased, but you know, it is what it is. But today I run Wall Street Mastermind, and over the last 3 years, we've worked with over 350, close to 400 students at this point, just helping them try to break into investment banking at the top investment banks out there, bulge bracket, elite boutique, middle market banks for the most part. And you know, so far, I mean, some of them are going through the process as we speak right now, but for the ones who have finished going through the process, we've been very successful. We've had just over a 90% success rate over the last 3 years. And that's even with the pandemic, with COVID, with the reduced hiring that happened, especially during this last cycle, right? And so I like to think that we know a thing or two about just how the investment banking recruiting process works. And we're going to talk about just one of the many pieces of the puzzle today, which is obviously how do you get selected for these interviews, right? Because what you have to understand is at most of these top banks, they're getting tens of thousands of applications every year, right? I think Goldman Sachs, for example, I want to say last year, they released these statistics. I think they had over 27,000 applications, and that's just for the investment banking division. That's not for all of Goldman Sachs. That doesn't include their middle office or back office functions. Doesn't include, you know, sales and trading, private wealth management, none of that. Just investment banking, strictly speaking, got over 27,000 applications. And I think they ended up hiring around 500 people or fewer than 500 people, right? So if you do the math, that's about a 1.8% acceptance rate. And obviously, you know, they interview more than 500 people, but, you know, not that many more, right? And so I would say, you know, it's getting the interviews. That's the first big hurdle or challenge that you have to overcome, right? And I would say probably 80 to 90% of the candidates out there who are applying to these investment banking jobs are either not getting interviews at all, or they're getting maybe very, very few interviews. And if you're only getting 1 or 2 interviews, at the end of the day, you still might not get an offer, because these interviews are extremely tough, right? They're notoriously difficult, not just the technical side of things, but also the behavioral side of things as well. Trying to figure out a way for yourself to stand out when you're competing against all of these very, very qualified students who go to Ivy League schools and have 4.0 GPAs and have done all these internships. Like, it's competitive out there, right? So, but first things first, though, before you even worry about any of that, you got to make sure you know how to get the interview. So we're going to break down exactly how our clients are doing that today. And really, like, if I were to just sum it up in one word, you can kind of already see it in the title of this video. Like, you need to get referrals, right? Just given how many applicants there are, if you're not getting referrals, you're just not going to be selected for an interview. I don't want to say never, but it's going to be very, very unlikely for you to be selected for an interview, unless, again, maybe you're like the prototypical candidate where you check all the boxes that they're looking for, right? You go to an Ivy League school, you have a perfect GPA, you have multiple finance internships already on your resume, you have a lot of leadership experience on your resume, you have all of these things going for you, where your resume just speaks for itself, right? Even then, I've seen students like that who didn't get interviews when they should have, right? And the reason why that happens is just because things just slip through the cracks. They get so many applications. If nobody knows who you are, it's very, very easy for your resume to just slip through the cracks. Someone didn't notice it. And also, a lot of times when people are deciding, or bankers are deciding who gets interviews and who doesn't, it's a very quick process, right? They got this entire stack of resumes to go through, and literally they won't spend more than 5 to 10 seconds on each resume. It's just like, yes, no, maybe, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And actually, the ratio isn't really like that. It's not like one yes and one no. It's yes, no, 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 yes, no, 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 yes, no, 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 yes, right? Like, so there's a lot more no's than yeses, right? So this is where the importance of referrals really comes in, because if someone does know you and if someone's going to bat for you and they're vouching for you and they're going to the people who are making these decisions and they're saying, hey, I know, XYZ person, I know Alexis Stone, and she's a great candidate, right? And, I think we should give her a chance to interview her, especially if you don't check all the boxes, right? Then it's even more important for you to have someone to go to bat for you, where they're saying, hey, I know Alexis doesn't really go to a target school, but I spoke to her and this is why I think she's great, right? Or, hey, I know Alexis' GPA is slightly, average or below average compared to what we're used to, but actually I spoke to her and, there's a very good reason for that, and this is why I think we should still talk to her, right? Or, hey, I think Alexis' resume is a little bit light on experience, but I spoke to her and I really like this about her. I really think we should give her a chance. Whatever it may be, right? If you have anything right now that's potentially holding you back from being like the ideal candidate, which, if we're being completely honest, probably 9 out of 10 students have at least one thing like that, where they were like, oh, I wish I was just a little bit better in this one area, right? So if that's your situation, then it's even more important for you to really make sure that you get out there and network with these bankers, right? Because if you can win them over, then they can go to bat for you, and that can make up for a lot of these issues that you might be having, right? So that's why, honestly, like, when I say we've worked with over 400 students, and about half of them are non-target school students, and I would say probably the average GPA for the students that we're working with is probably between like 3.4 to 3.6, right? So it's pretty average. It's not like, oh, everybody that we work with has a 3.8 or above, but 3.4 to 3.6. Some even go as low as 3.0. And so even despite all of that, right? And a lot of the students that we work with, actually, when they first come to us, they don't have any relevant experience whatsoever, right? And so despite all of that, though, they're still getting into investment banking. at a 90% plus success rate, right? So that's what's astounding about that. And again, the first step, starts with getting the interview. So how do we actually do that exactly? We do have a limited amount of time here, right? So I'm gonna try to spend probably like the next 30 minutes or so just going through everything as deeply as I can in the amount of time that we have. And then I also want to make sure that I save some time at the end for Q&A. Okay, so if as you're watching this, you have a question about anything that I'm saying, I want you to go and just drop a comment down below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn right now. It doesn't matter where you're watching this. Drop a comment down below, and then I'll make sure that I save time at the end to answer all of your questions. Okay, so with that said, let's dive into it. How do you get these referrals? Well, most of you probably already know this, right? But you need to network with these bankers. But the term networking is very vague, right? Like, what does that mean exactly? I mean, in fact, most of you probably never heard of that term until you start recruiting for investment banking, and then you hear upperclassmen and other people tell you like, oh, you got to network, right? So how do you do that? Well, most people think that networking just means, you go on LinkedIn and, you find a bunch of alumni or whatever alumni you have from your school who are already working in banking, and then you just submit or not submit, and then you just like basically reach out to them, send them a message, and spam as many of them as possible and hope that they'll talk to you, right? And then in reality, though, you have to be a lot more methodical than that, right? Because you can't do that. In fact, that's what most people are doing. But I can tell you, most people are failing miserably at networking. And so you don't want to be doing the same things that everyone else is doing. Okay. So how do you actually go about this? Well, the first thing you got to understand is if we really break down the networking process, there's two primary challenges, right? There's getting the banker to actually talk to you in the first place, because they're very, very busy, and there's not a whole lot of incentive for them to talk to you, right? You got to put yourself in their shoes. If they're already working 80, 90, 100 hours a week, especially nowadays, we've all been reading in the news how much people have been working, especially nowadays with the pandemic, working from home. You guys probably saw the survey that came out of Goldman Sachs where 13 analysts did a survey about how overworked they are. Like, people are busy, right? And so if you want people to actually talk to you, that in and of itself is a challenge, right? Especially when you're a stranger, don't really know who you are. And so that's the first step that you really got to hone in on and figure out, like, you're never going to be able to get 100% of the people that you reach out to talk to you, by the way. Like, that's not a realistic expectation. And so, but the point is, you don't have to get 100% of the people, but you should try to get that conversion rate to be as high as possible, right? Like, for every 10 bankers that you reach out to, how many bankers can you get to actually respond to you and engage with you, right? So that's the first challenge. The second challenge is, okay, now that they've agreed to talk to you, what should you be talking to them about, right? Like, what should this conversation be like? How do you structure it? And what are you hoping to get out of the conversation, right? How do you get them to take the action that you want them to take once you've had that conversation, right? And you pretty much have one shot, right, at winning them over, which is that initial conversation that they agree to have with you. That's your one shot to make the first impression that you want to make and win them over. And if you're able to win them over during that kind of first conversation, then you can think about how you nurture that relationship over time. If you don't win them over during that first conversation, it doesn't really matter what you do after that. They're just not going to help you, right? You can follow up as much as you want. You can send them all the updates you want. They're just going to write you off, right? So those are the two primary challenges, and most people either struggle with one or the other or both, right? So let's talk about the first one, right? First one, in terms of how do you get the bankers to actually respond to you? A lot of people say, well, yeah, just go online, find alumni, and reach out to them. Yes, like alumni, that's just like the low-hanging fruit. They went to the same school as you. So obviously they'd be more likely to respond to you. But even then, one, depending on what school you go to, you may or may not have a lot of alumni working on Wall Street. Like if you go to Wharton, sure, like there are a dime a dozen, you can find them pretty much with your eyes closed, right? If you go to a non-target school or something though, that's not the case, right? So you can't always just only rely on alumni. The second thing is also, like, even if you have a lot of alumni, say you go to a school like Wharton, that means that you also have a lot more competition from your school. There's a lot more students within your class who are also trying to break into investment banking. So they're also reaching out to, guess who? The exact same alumni that you're reaching out to, right? Because they all have the same idea, right? So even then, as an alum, if I'm getting dozens of networking requests from, all these students from my school, and I don't know any of them, like there's no way I'm going to have enough time to talk to all of them, right? So how do you make sure that you're the one who gets picked amongst, all of your competition, and that, the alum chooses to maybe spend 30 minutes of their day talking to you as opposed to talking to somebody else, right? So there's really a few factors that affect that. First one, a lot of people don't really think about this. It's actually your resume and your LinkedIn profile, right? Both of those things matter a lot. Okay. People know the importance of a resume but they typically think about it as like, oh, I gotta submit my resume for the application, so that's why I need it to be good, right? In reality, no matter how good your resume is, like I said, it's most likely not going to be able to do 100% of the heavy lifting when it comes to getting you the interview, right? So yes, you do need a good resume for the application, but actually a lot of times when you reach out to network, you either attach your resume so that they know what you look like on paper, or sometimes even if you don't attach your resume, I know a lot of bankers will respond and say, hey, can you please send over your resume before they decide if they want to talk to you or not, right? So why are they asking for that? Because if you think about it, like if they look at your resume and they see that you go to a crappy school, you got a crappy grades, and you got nothing else going on in your resume, there's probably no chance you're going to get this job. So it's nothing personal if they decide not to talk to you. It's just that, hey, if they're already so limited on time, there's nothing personal, but they're just not going to, they don't feel like they're going to be able to help you even if they talk to you. And even if they talk to you and they really, really like you as a person, it's going to take too much work and it's going to be too inconvenient for them to get you the interview, right? So that's why it's so important for you to present yourself in the best light possible on paper. And so part of that is your resume, but also sometimes they won't ask for your resume, but what they'll do instead is they'll actually go and look you up on LinkedIn, right? Which is basically just kind of like the digital version of your resume. So like some of you probably don't even have a LinkedIn profile right now, in which case you need to go out and get one. Okay. Some of you might have a LinkedIn profile, but it's very new and it's very empty and there's not a whole lot on it. You haven't put a lot of time or thought into optimizing your profile, and you don't have that many connections. Your profile picture looks crappy. Your cover photo looks crappy. You haven't thought about like what goes into the headline that's right under your profile photo. You haven't thought carefully about like what information you want to include in the summary section where you can kind of like write a paragraph. I think it's like up to 2,000 characters about yourself, right? You haven't thought about like how you're presenting the work experiences that you have on there. LinkedIn kind of shows like the top 5 or the 5 most recent experiences that you decide to show in the work experience section. And sometimes less is actually more. So like a lot of times we look at one of our students or some of our students' LinkedIn profile, and they've done like 10 different things, right? Including internships and extracurricular activities and volunteer organizations and whatever, and jobs where they worked as a cashier at the grocery store when they were younger, and they're just including their entire history on their LinkedIn profile. You actually don't want to do that, right? Because a lot of times people aren't going to click on the little see more link at the bottom and expand and look at your entire history. So they're only going to be able to see the first 5. So actually what I would recommend is just only showing the top 5 most impressive and most relevant experiences that you have, so that those are the only 5 things that people see, right? So there's things like that you got to think about, right? And then there's also skills and endorsements, like what kind of skills do you have and like how many people have endorsed you. You should be trying to get as many of those as possible, and like especially for skills that are relevant to banking, right? And like, do you have any recommendation letters from whether it's your, I don't know, old bosses or coworkers or your professors or whoever you can get one from, right? LinkedIn has that functionality, which I don't see most college students using. And so those are all like just examples, quick examples. And there's a lot of others that we don't have time to dive into every single one, but there's a lot of optimizations you can make around that, right? And then more importantly, regardless of whether it's your resume or your LinkedIn profile, optimizing your profile and optimizing your resume and formatting it and everything, that's all good, right? And then using the right template. But that's the easy stuff, right? The other thing is, aside from how you package everything together, is there any substance behind it, right? Like, do you have the actual experiences that you need so that you can present yourself as someone who has a demonstrable track record of being interested in finance and being interested in this field in general, right? So if you don't have any internship experience in finance, like whether it's in like banking or private equity or equity research, or there's a lot of things you can do, right? Venture capital, corporate development, even something like, this is lower on my list, but like, private wealth management or FP&A, like valuation roles. Like there's so many things you could be doing, right? But if you don't have any of that, right, or you're not in any finance organizations on campus, for example, and when I look at your resume, it's all a bunch of law stuff or pre-med stuff, or I don't know, worse yet, like you don't have any of that and you just have only like these blue collar hourly wage jobs. Like that's not gonna cut it, right? So there's a substance aspect of it, which is like, if you don't have enough experience, that's probably what you need to worry about first and foremost, especially with how early investment banking recruiting starts nowadays. You got to think about it. If you work backwards, to get the full-time offer, you need the junior summer internship, right? The recruiting for the junior summer internship starts about halfway through your sophomore year. Like for those of you that are graduating in the class of 2023, you're already going through recruiting right now for that summer 2022 internship, right? In fact, a lot of offers have already gone out for summer 2022 at some of these firms. Like we've had some of our clients have already gotten offers for summer 2022 from, let me think about the list of firms. Like Citi has given out offers, Houlihan Lokey has given out offers, PJT Partners has given out offers. Who else? Piper Sandler has given out offers. Houlihan Lokey has given out offers. And then what else? Like we've also had multiple clients that have had super days, right, with firms like Blackstone and Catalyst and Centerview and Rain Group, and an upcoming super day with Credit Suisse. So my point is, even for the current sophomores, it's only early April right now, right? They're already either getting offers or moving to the super day stage. So things are happening very quickly, right? So if you're a freshman right now, right, and you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh, I still got a lot of time, I'm only a freshman. Like, no, like less than a year from now, you're going to be in this situation of like, okay, all the interviews are happening, offers are starting to go out. In fact, every year it seems to only get earlier and earlier, right? Like this year, the recruiting timeline got pulled up earlier than last year. Last year, the first application kicked off in November of sophomore year, which is like almost halfway through sophomore year. This year, the first application opened up in late September of sophomore year, which is actually at the beginning of sophomore year, right? Another case in point, last year, or actually for the last 2 years, JP Morgan, they actually deliberately pushed back, them and Goldman Sachs deliberately pushed back their recruiting timeline because they said, whoa, this is crazy. Like all the banks keep moving their timeline earlier and earlier, and it's not good for the students. It's not good for anyone. We're going to do the right thing. I'm going to push recruiting back, and we're going to wait until sophomore summer to start recruiting. So for the last 2 years, JP Morgan didn't open their applications until June 1st of after sophomore year. Goldman Sachs didn't open their application until July 1st after sophomore year. And they were hoping that once they did that, because there are two of the top banks out there, they were hoping that once they did that, a lot of the other banks will follow suit, right? Unfortunately, nobody else really followed them, right? And so what happened this year is, for those of you that haven't been paying attention, JP Morgan actually opened up their application a little over a week ago, right? In the last week of March, JP Morgan opened their application for summer 2022, which, what does that tell us? That tells us that they went through this little 2-year experiment where they wanted to push recruiting back, and then they changed their mind, and now they pulled it back up to March, which is closer to like what they used to do, probably because they realized like, hey, we're just losing too many of the best candidates to all of our competitors, right? And they were sick and tired of doing that. So in other words, like, I'm not optimistic that the timeline is going to get pushed back anytime soon. A couple of firms have tried doing that and try to start kind of like this new trend, but no one really followed them, right? So I think that's only going to continue to get earlier and earlier, meaning, again, time is of the essence, right? If you're lacking relevant experiences on your resume right now, you need to, there's never too early of a time to start accumulating more internship experiences. Even if you only started freshman year, like as soon as you got on campus, if you think about it, you got 2 semesters during freshman year, you got the summer after freshman year, and you got the first semester of sophomore year, and then after that, pretty much the recruiting process for junior summer internship starts, right? So that's 4 different semesters, if you want to include the summer and call it that. That's 4 different semesters when you can actually go out and get relevant experiences. So at most, you might be able to get 4 internships on your resume. Now, 4 is a lot, right? I would say even 3 is like pretty packed, right? But like ideally nowadays, like if you only have 1, it's a bit light, to be honest, right? Like ideally, you probably want to have at least 2, if not 3 internships, if you can swing it, if you can manage it, right? And the only way to really do that is to start early, okay? So you got to be doing that. And if you don't know how to do that, like a lot of underclassmen struggle with that in terms of like how to actually get relevant experience. So if you don't know how to do that, reach out to us. We can help you out with that. Like I don't have time to go into detail on how we do that right now in this training, just in the interest of time. That's a whole separate topic of its own. But what I can tell you is we have our own proprietary methodology where every single client that has come into our program and worked with us, even ones who came in with 0 relevant experience on their resume whatsoever, like they're struggling to get their first internship experience on their resume, right? And the first one's always the hardest. It's kind of like the chicken and the egg problem where they say, well, I know I need more internships, but if I don't have any relevant internship, no one's willing to hire me. So if no one's willing to hire me, how am I supposed to get relevant experience, right? So it's kind of like the chicken and the egg problem. So we had to figure out a way to solve that. And basically, we figured it out. And every single client that's come into our program, even without any experience whatsoever prior to that, if they need help getting an internship, on average, we are able to get them a relevant internship within just 1 to 2 weeks on average, okay? And it's worked 100% of the time, right? So it can work for them, it can work for you. Doesn't matter like what year in school you are, doesn't matter what school you go to, target school, non-target school. For the most part, it doesn't really matter that much what your GPA is, as long as it's respectable, right? Like don't come with like a 2.6 or something. Don't come with a 2 handle in general, but it doesn't matter what your school you go to, what GPA you are. It doesn't matter if you're an international student or domestic. Like, doesn't matter. Like, every single person has been able to get an internship, right? So we can help you with that. But long story short, make sure that you look good on paper. That's the first point. That's actually more important than anything else. A lot of people focus on like, oh, well, what do I actually say when I reach out? Like, yes, all that stuff matters too. Like your email that you send matters. Or if you go through LinkedIn, then the way you write your LinkedIn message matters. What you put in the subject line matters, right? Even down to what you put in the signature matters, right? All of that matters. But, and by the way, this question is probably going to come up. So between your resume and your LinkedIn profile, I would suggest that you, not your resume, between your email and your LinkedIn, I would recommend that you reach out through email. Okay, bankers is a lot more responsive on email. They check email all the time. They have to as a part of their job. I know a lot of bankers that actually don't check LinkedIn that often, right? And so I recommend, reaching out through email. You're going to get a higher response rate, higher conversion rate by doing it that way. Okay. So that's the first thing, right? Make sure you look it on paper. Make sure that you know how to reach out the right way. Make sure you reach out to the right channels, and then make sure that your outreach message, your first outreach message, it's got to be a couple things. It's got to be professional. It's got to be error free, like no grammar or spelling errors. Like that sounds very basic, but you'd be surprised how often we proofread people's emails and there's just like silly mistakes in there, right? Or it could not be a typo. It could also be like just a formatting mistake, right? Even down to like having an extra space, having two spaces between two words instead of just one space. Bankers are notoriously nitpicky about formatting stuff. Like they will spot that because that's like part of their job is to spot things like that, right? And they call that attention to detail. So not having any of that, has to be professional. It's got to be concise. Nobody, like people are super busy. They don't have time to read like a super long email. They don't care about your life story. They don't care about any of that, right? And so it has to be a very well written email, right? And so like what we'll actually do with a lot of our clients is like after they write their email, everyone will create like the set of templates that they want to use for their different outreach messages, like their initial message, their follow-up message, their first follow-up message, their second follow-up message, so on and so forth, right? The thank you emails, like there's several different types of email templates that you're probably going to use over and over again. And so everyone's going to have a different template. You create the templates, and then we'll actually proofread your templates for you, and we'll actually vet everything, help you rewrite it, make it perfect. And then once you have that, all you're doing is you can automate all of that, right? In terms of like getting everything scheduled out, how many you want to send a day, who do you want to target, how do you like kind of cluster them into different groups, because like there is some strategy behind that too in terms of like not reaching out to all the same people in the same group from the same office at the same time. Like you don't want to come across as the spammer, so to speak, right? And so there's a lot that goes into that, but making sure that your templates are perfect and making sure you have a good follow-up sequence, because a lot of the times if you don't um, a lot of times if you don't get a response on the first email, which is going to happen a lot, by the way, that doesn't necessarily mean that the banker is ignoring you on purpose. Okay, it doesn't really necessarily mean that they don't want to talk to you. What it actually means, sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, sometimes they are just ignoring you. Sometimes they don't want to talk to you. But a lot of times it's just they're busy, right? A lot of times they see your email and they're like, okay, this is low priority. I got something else going on. I have this deadline that's coming up. I have this meeting. I got to get this pitch book out. I got to finish building this model, whatever, right? Or my managing director is also emailing me or calling me at the same time. So I'm going to deal with that first. Like you're just not very high on their priorities, nor should you be. So they might say, hey, I'm going to come back to this later. And they might forget, right? Because they get so many emails. And by the time they finish with everything else, they already forgot about your email, so they don't respond, right? So a lot of times, like if you follow up, then they'll actually respond on either your first follow-up or your second follow-up. Like I would not reach out to a banker more than 3 times if they're not responding to you, because then you're just being annoying, right? So you gotta be super professional, super polite, space it out. Don't like follow up incessantly, like email them now and then like email them again tomorrow and email them again the day after. Like that's just being annoying, right? So anyway, there's a whole lot that goes into like getting responses and getting people to actually talk to you. That's the first part. That's what we've been talking about so far, right? Take a sip of water here. And I see a question from Henry Stevenson. So you said, how are you able to get internships for your clients so fast, especially if they do not have experience already? Yeah. So, I mean, again, like I said, that's a whole separate conversation, which we don't have time to, I guess, super deep into here. But what I'll just tell you is the high level process looks like this. First, we want to take whatever experiences you already do have. We want to fix up your resume and your LinkedIn profile, like I said, right? Like make sure that at least the packaging is good, right? And everything looks very presentable, and just like take whatever you already have and make the most out of that. That's all you can do at that point, because you can't lie about the experiences that you have, right? Once you have that, then it really comes down to like, honestly, like knowing where to look, having like your own, almost like your own proprietary source that you can go to, where you know that there are a lot of these firms looking for these internships, and the internship is highly relevant, and the internship is pretty flexible in terms of scheduling. Like we've actually found a way to do that well, because most of our students are very busy, right? And so They have class, they have school during the week. It's not like they can just work, anytime the firm wants them to. Like they need a relatively flexible schedule, right? So, and even during the pandemic, like they have to be remote, right? Most of these have to be remote because most firms aren't actually taking interns in person because of social distancing. So we had to like check all these boxes. So we figured out a way to do that. And actually, that's kind of part of our secret sauce, right? But the other thing you got to realize too is like, um, especially if they, and you ask like, especially if they don't have experience already, right? The thing is like, if you don't have experience already, like everyone's got to start somewhere, right? Like every single person that ever ended up breaking into finance, they had to get their first finance experience somewhere, right? So does that mean it's not hard or whatever to get that first experience? No, the first one is always the hardest, but it can be done if one, you know where to look for these internships. That's going to be highly relevant and check all those boxes that I talked about, and yet still have it be not super competitive, right? Because not a whole lot of other people know about it yet, right? That's also part of the reason why we don't tell anyone about like exactly where we go to find these jobs unless they're working with us already, because that's a competitive advantage for our clients, right? The second thing is less people know about it, it's less competitive, but also it comes down to your interviewing skills, right? Because if you don't have as much relevant experience or any relevant experience on your resume, but you can present yourself very well in these interviews and you come across as knowledgeable and you're a sharp dude, right? And you're hardworking and you have all the traits and qualities that they look for, then you can convince them to really take a chance on you, right? So that's really the key. Like there's multiple moving pieces to that. That's why I say it's a much longer conversation. And so, by the way, like Henry, if you want to know more about that, like or for not just Henry, for the rest of you, any of you that are watching this right now, like if you feel like that's something that you need right now, like maybe you're like just missing that first internship and you need help with that. And once you get that and you get your foot in the door, you know that, it's going to open the floodgates for you. Then I would encourage you guys to just go and book a free strategy session with our team, right? Then we'll hop on a call with you one-on-one and we'll just talk to you for like 45 minutes. It's completely free. And we'll learn more about what your goals are for recruiting, what kind of banks you're trying to break into, what your current situation is, what are you struggling with, what do you need help with? And maybe part of that is, hey, you need help getting your first internship, right? And if we can't help you, we'll walk you through like if and how we think we might be able to do that. Or if we can't help you, then we'll give you some advice on what we think you should do instead, right? So you can do that if you just go to our website. It's www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. Okay. And the street's abbreviated to STs. wallstmastermind.com/apply. Okay. So it's just a little plug right there. Quick plug since you asked about it. But coming back to the topic that we were talking about. So first step is getting people to actually respond to you, right? And we spent a lot of time talking about that. Now, once people actually agree to talk to you, the second step is like, what do you actually talk to people about, right? Now, what you should not do for these networking conversations, which is what most people are doing, is you should not just go into these conversations with like a predetermined script, with a predetermined list of questions and say, oh, I have this list of 10 or 20 canned questions that I've already prepared. Like, oh, so how'd you get into investment banking? Or what do you like the most about your job? Or why did you decide to choose Goldman Sachs and not all the other firms? Like, people typically what they do is they go in with this list of questions that they prepared, and they ask those questions no matter what. And then what ends up happening is every single conversation ends up being the same. They're not really learning anything new. It's really, really monotonous. And also the bankers have heard these questions hundreds of times. And so it becomes like just very boring for them as well. And just like kind of draining. It's like, oh, not again, not this question again, right? For the 80th time, right? And so your goal for networking is like you want to be memorable for the right reasons. You want to stand out, right? And really realize like there's two things that you have to prove to them. One is you need to prove that first and foremost that you're actually qualified, right? Because even though this is a networking conversation, it's not really an interview, you're still being evaluated. It's just like I always tell our clients, like networking is really just another form of interviewing, right? So if you are talking to a banker, like they're trying to assess, they know why you're talking to them. They know that, hey, this person probably just wants an interview, right? And so they're evaluating and assessing you and seeing like, well, is this person worth me helping them get an interview for, right? And so sometimes bankers will actually even test you, right? Like they can definitely ask you behavioral questions like, hey, tell me about yourself and walk me through your resume and why do you want to do banking and why are you interested in our firm and whatever else they want to know about you. But sometimes we also see bankers actually turn these networking conversations into a technical interview on the spot where they're kind of like giving you a pop quiz to see like, hey, how much do you actually know, right? Like if I actually refer this person for an interview, like, is he prepared or is he actually going to make me look bad, right? And if you can't answer like basic technical questions that they throw at you, no one's going to want to stick their neck out for you, only to have to explain to their colleagues later on, why this person wasn't prepared, right? Or what they saw in this candidate who didn't turn out to be very good, right? So the first thing is that you got to come across as knowledgeable and prepared and someone who understands what investment banking is and knows what you're getting yourself into, right? The other part, aside from being qualified, which is, okay, now if you've demonstrated that you're qualified, there's going to be a smaller subset of people who, a smaller subset of students that they networked with who all also come across as pretty qualified, right? Like you're not going to be the only person that's qualified. And so the people who are not qualified, they'll get eliminated, but out of the people who are qualified, they still can't help every single one of you, right? So what they're going to do is they're actually going to, they have to decide like, well, who do I like the most? Like if all these people are qualified, as human beings, like we're just going to help the people that we like the most, right? So I really like Henry as a person. I had a great conversation with him. I could really see myself working with him and getting along with him. I don't mind being in the office with him for 80, 90, 100 hours a week. I could see myself grabbing a beer with him after work. I don't mind being stuck at the airport with him. Like that's what they're really looking for at the end of the day, right? So like if they like you, they like someone, they're going to go out of their way to help that person. If they don't like you, it doesn't matter how qualified you are, they're not going to help you, right? So how do you come across as qualified and how do you come across as someone who's likable? A big part of that, part of that is, like I said, comes into how you answer the questions that they ask you. And then part of that is what questions are you asking them, right? So asking good questions. And in fact, we actually don't tell our clients like, hey, this is the list of questions that you should be asking, right? So like ask this first and this and this and this. Like it's not a script that they're following, but there is a framework. There is a structure around it where you say, there's like a 5-part framework that we tell our clients. It's called the ideas framework. So it's like introduction, day-to-day, equalization, ask and setup, right? Sorry, that slipped my mind right there. So it's a 5-part framework where they're not like exact questions, but they're like categories of questions that you should be, kind of checking the boxes for. And then within each of those categories, you have the freedom to toggle between different questions depending on how the conversation is flowing, right? And actually, in reality, you might have we don't even call them questions, we call them like conversation starters, right? And then you might start a conversation with a certain question. And then depending on how they answer that question, you actually want to ask a follow-up question to that. So there's almost like so you can think of it as like a decision tree, right? But if you do it that way, what ends up happening is your questions no longer feel like an interrogation, right? Well, interrogation would be like, hey, I have a list of predetermined questions, and no matter how you answer these questions, I'm going to move on to the next question. And that's going to make your conversation seem very disjointed. And they're probably just not going to have a whole lot of rapport with you. But you got to think about like what it feels like when you're talking to a friend, right? When you're talking to a friend, the conversation is flowing, right? It's a natural back and forth. You say something and they say something in response to what you said, and you're going to say something else in response to what they said. And everything is kind of flowing naturally. You don't go into a conversation with your friend with like a predetermined agenda for what you're going to say exactly, right? So why would you have your networking conversations that way? It doesn't make sense, right? So having this type of framework and having almost like this type of decision tree, it's going to just allow you to have much more natural, much more organic, and much stronger conversations, which is then going to result in you having better conversations with the banker and you standing out from all the other students who are having these very forced, unnatural, awkward, robotic conversations. Right. So if you guys have been through one of those conversations already, you know exactly what I mean when I'm talking about. That's what you're doing wrong right there. Right. So if you can do those two things, you can get the banker to respond to you, and you can have the right type of conversation with them. That's so much better, and so much it just feels so much better for the banker versus the conversations that they're having with all the other students from your school or from different schools. Then I guarantee you, like, they will proactively offer to refer you for this interview. Okay. Or they'll, at a minimum, they'll, if they don't have, some people have the power to do that, some people don't, right? But even if they don't, they'll at least proactively offer to help you out some other way. Maybe they introduce you to other people who actually do have the power to do that, right? Or maybe they help you out in some other ways. We've even had bankers who liked our clients so much after networking with them, they'll like schedule another time to like do mock interviews with them, or to like actually edit their resume, give them feedback and whatever. And like when a banker is going that far out of their way to help you, then you know that they're really rooting for you and they're really trying to help you. Right? So that's the goal that you should be having. So that's like a high level. Now I've been going on for a long time already, so I want to make sure that I leave some time for your questions. So let me open it up right now, because I have about 15 minutes left. So I want to make sure that I answer whatever questions you guys might have about anything I just talked about. And I know I just dumped a lot on you guys. So I want to give you guys as much information as possible in the shortest amount of time to make this valuable for you guys, right? So if you guys have questions for me that you like me to answer, now would be the time for you to drop it down in the comment section, whether you're on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube. And once I see those questions, I'll start answering them. Okay. And I'll answer as many questions as I can in the amount of time we have left. Now, while I'm waiting for that, just because these websites do lag a little bit from the time you guys write the question until the time I see it, I'll just do a quick little commercial break. For those of you that joined late, again, if you don't know kind of like who we are or what we're about, this is like, I run a company called Wall Street Mastermind, right? My name is Sam. I run a company called Wall Street Mastermind. And basically what we do is we help college and master's or MBA students, and also master's in finance students, but college, undergrad, and master's students break into investment banking, all the top banks. And we do that in a very unique manner. Like, we don't just say, oh, here's an interview guide, or, oh, here's a bunch of videos, like, go watch this and figure this out on your own. We actually work one-on-one with every single client, and we coach you through every single step of the process, right? So it's a very unique model that like no one else is really doing this out there, where if you just picture if you had a very experienced or multiple very experienced bankers who have worked at these top banks, have actually served as interviewers for these recruiting processes, and they know how things work from the inside, right? Because we've been in those discussions where we're deliberating on who to give offers to or what resumes we wanted to pick, and we've been on the other side of the table networking with students. Like, we know what to look for. So if you have someone like that that's available to you on demand 24/7, anytime you need it, you have unlimited access to our team from the time you start preparing until you land the offer, okay? It basically guarantees that you will never not know what you should be doing. You will never not know how to do those things. You will never not know what order you should be doing those things in. Anytime you have a question about anything that comes up, you have one source of truth to go to get the answer as quickly as possible, which is why our clients are able to move through everything so much more efficiently and so much more effectively, right? And so when they're competing against other college students who are trying to figure all this out on their own, it's really not a fair competition, to be honest, right? So that's kind of what we do. And so if you guys are interested in something like that, feel free to reach out to our team. Again, like, I'll drop the link down below. It's www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. And then basically, you guys can book a call with our team, and we'll hop on a free strategy session with you. And again, what we'll do is we'll learn more about what is your exact, what are your goals? What type of banks are you trying to break into? What challenges you're currently having? Because what we learn is that everybody's different and they have different challenges that they have to overcome. Right? And depending on what you already have on your resume, what challenges you have, what your goals are, how much time you have left, we'll walk you through like what we think you need to do to get to where you want to go, right? We'll customize a game plan for you, so to speak. Okay. So there's no one size fits all solution here. So that's what we do. So hopefully that helps you guys. And so let's go into some of these questions. I see a couple questions coming in. So let me start with Lionel here. So Lionel says, oh, sorry, it's Liren or Lyron. Sorry, I might be butchering your name. But so Liren asks, I know this might be really late, but I'm a college freshman and I really want to investment banking when I graduate college. Are there any jobs that I could apply to right now to gain some experience? Second question is, should I apply to regional boutique investment banks or private wealth management or something else? I live in NYC, so there are definitely a lot of banks near me. Thank you so much, by the way. So, Liren, it's a great question. When you say, I know this might be really late, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but if you're a college freshman right now, and you're in the second semester of freshman year, I would actually say, you're not super late. In fact, I wouldn't say you're early because there's no such thing as starting early anymore, given how early the recruiting process starts. But you can definitely look for an internship that you can do over your freshman summer, for example. If you can get something quickly enough, like you might be able to get something that you can do for like the last 2 months of the semester here, maybe like in April and May, and then you can squeeze in another internship in the summer. But that depends on how quickly you move and how effective and efficient you are. But that's like best case scenario. So you might be able to squeeze in 2 internships before you even start your sophomore year. But if not, definitely squeeze in 1 internship over your freshman summer. And then even your first semester sophomore year, once you have your freshman summer internship lined up, then immediately, like, don't rest on your laurels, like immediately turn your attention to finding something for your sophomore summer, or sorry, not sophomore summer, sophomore first semester internship as well, which is most likely going to be a part-time thing, like I said, because you'll be in school, right? And then that could give you 2 solid internship experiences before the junior summer internship recruiting process actually starts, right? So if you have 2 really solid internship experiences and you add that on top of, I don't know, like what school you go to, and assuming you go to a decent school and your grades are respectable and you have, pretty decent extracurricular activities, especially if you have leadership positions in those clubs, then I think you're in good shape, right? At least on paper, from a on paper standpoint. I'm not saying like that's going to guarantee you a job. There are a lot of other pieces to the puzzle, obviously, but that's kind of a pretty good start, right? So in terms of like what type of, are there any jobs that you could apply to right now to gain some? Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of jobs. Right? Like I said, like, you want to do something that's relevant, right? So I would say like the most relevant for a freshman, the best thing you can get as a freshman is actually like into one of those diversity programs that a lot of these bigger banks offer, like bulge bracket banks, elite boutique banks, middle market banks. Pretty much like all the top 50 banks, most of them have some sort of diversity program now. They're mostly reserved for freshmen and sophomores, but you do have to be eligible, meaning like there different firms have different definition of what diversity means, but typically it's like if you're female, if you're Black, Hispanic, or Native American, if you are a veteran, so if you've been in the military in some way, shape, or form, if you are LGBTQ, if you are disabled, so those all count as some sort of diversity, so to speak. Some firms will also consider like if you're a first generation college student and they count that as diversity, but not every firm does that. But the other ones that I listed, the other qualifications are pretty universal across most firms, right? So if you can swing something like that, that would actually be the best option, but not everyone can. If you can't do something like that, then I would say like the next best option is probably, like you said, like a regional boutique investment bank, right? Because obviously that's investment banking, so that's going to be the most relevant. It's just at a smaller firm, which is fine because you're only a freshman, right? Otherwise, private equity is probably the next best thing. I would say like investment banking, private equity, things like equity research, pretty good as well, because you're doing a lot of like valuation and also like 3-statement modeling and things like that. Valuation roles are good because obviously you're doing a lot of valuation in banking. Corporate development, which is kind of like doing M&A, but you're doing it in-house for an actual company, right? As opposed to bankers are kind of more like an outside third party consultant almost, so to speak, right? So corporate development could be good. You mentioned private wealth management. I mean, yeah, I see some people do private wealth management internships as well, and that could work. But in my experience, private wealth management internships are a lot more hit or miss, meaning like a lot of private wealth management internships like are just more like sales roles. They're not even like really finance roles. Like you're not actually picking stocks or analyzing these companies and looking at their financials. Like you're actually helping them, manage their CRMs and source more clients and helping them figure out how they can reach out to more high net worth individuals and get them to give them their money and so on and so forth. So like it depends on if you do go the PWM route, like it depends on what you'll actually be doing there. Like you'll want to make sure that you ask them those questions and you're very clear on what the expectation is going in. Because I've done PWM internships myself back when I was a student, and the ones that I did, I was just doing a lot of like paper pushing and stuff. I didn't really learn that much, right? Which actually gets kind of tricky when that happens, because then you put it on your resume and then you go into these interviews and then you're gonna have to explain like what you did on those jobs. And if you didn't really do anything that relevant, a lot of times it actually makes it even harder, because now you're trying to like spin it into something that is actually not, right? You're trying to like make a lot of stuff up, which some people can do that, but a lot of people, they struggle when it comes to that, right? So ideally you want to do an internship that's as relevant as possible, which is going to give you more relevant project experience to talk about. And so, yeah, man, PWM, it could work, but probably not my top choice. And then, there's even things like FP&A and stuff like that, which you could do, right? So those are just some ideas. I actually did a video on this on my YouTube channel. So you can go and try to find that video, and I kind of like listed out all the different type of jobs that would be good for investment banking resumes, and I ranked them in order of like most desirable to least desirable, right? So if you just go on YouTube and you search Wall Street Mastermind, you should be able to find my channel. Okay, so I would check that out. Leon also says, I heard that it's a good idea to tell them that you are willing to work for free in order to get the job. I don't have any relevant finance internship right now, so would that be a good idea? Yeah, man. I mean, look, obviously, if you're willing to work for free, that always does make things easier, because there are a lot of jobs out there that are unpaid, right? And typically the ones that are paid, the bar is going to be a little bit higher. But I would say like what I usually tell my clients is like, I wouldn't necessarily lead with that, right? I wouldn't necessarily lead with like go and just tell everyone like, hey, like I would love to work for you for free or whatever, because in my opinion, that's not the posture that you want to give off. Like what you're doing when you tell everyone, proactively tell everyone that, oh, you're willing to work for free, it's kind of like you're almost like cheapening yourself a little bit, right? You're saying like, hey, I know I'm not that great right now, so like, can you please, just like do some charity work and take me in and let me intern for you, right? It's like, no, I mean, I'm a hard worker. I do good work. I mean, I don't have any experience right now, but like, I would love to come in and help out. And so I don't like leading with it, but like, if you reach out to a firm and you ask them if you can intern for them, and they say like, no, sorry, we don't have any spots for interns right now. Like I might ask them like, okay, got it. Is that like it's like a budget issue? Like you guys don't have headcount for it because you don't want to pay for intern or whatever? Because like if that's the case, like I'd be happy to work for free. That's more of a kind of a objection handling type of thing, but that's not like something that I'm leading with, right? Because who knows? Like maybe they might be willing to pay you. And in fact, I would say, typically in our experience, the internships that actually pay you will usually, not always, but usually give you a better experience and more responsibilities, and therefore will look better on your resume. You have more to talk about than an internship that's unpaid. Because like for unpaid internships, like they don't care if they're just giving you like a ton of busy work and like stuff that's not that important, right? Like you're just basically cheap or free labor to them, right? But if you want like substantial work, sometimes like those are going to come with the paid internships, right? So I don't really write those off, but yeah, like if you're just starting out and you feel like you're not able to get a paid internship, you just want to get a free one or unpaid one just to get your foot in the door, then I think that's a great idea. Because like, even if you were paid for these internships, like it's not like the amount of money you're going to make is going to be, you know, life changing or whatever. Like that's not the point, right? What's going to be most valuable about that experience is giving your resume that boost that it needs, so that you can catch the bigger fish later on, which is, you know, the summer internship from the Bulge-Bracket Elite Boutique Bank, right? And then when you get that, you'll make $20,000 to $30,000 over a summer, right? And that's where the real money's coming, right? So hopefully that makes sense, Leon. Let me turn over to this other question. So Edward says, can you go deeper into the framework for coffee chats? Yeah, I mean, Edward, like, what do you want to know? I mean, like, essentially, you know, it's like I said. I mean, look, we have an entire training on that framework, which is like an hour long. So I only have like a couple minutes here, so I probably won't be able to go into everything in detail. But if you want to learn the framework in detail, again, I would encourage you to go and schedule a call with us and speak with our team if you haven't already, because that's all inside of our program, and we can walk you through everything in detail. But again, at a high level, it's a 5-part framework. It's called Introduction, Day-to-Day, Equalization, ask, and setup, right? And so each of those 5 parts of the conversation, different objective that you should wish, and the goal is to just have the entire conversation flow progressively, where you're going from being a total stranger at the beginning of the conversation, which is why we start with introduction, right? There's a category of like introductory questions where you're like getting to know each other, right? And then progressing that gradually up the ladder to, by the end of the interview or the end of the networking conversation, you being able to make the ask, but also like basically get what you came for. But also the setup is essentially like having them set you up with other people and like helping you expand your network, right? So those are like usually like the 3 things that we want. We spend the first half of the conversation, at least the first, probably even like I would say the first 2/3, or maybe even like the first 80% of the conversation, accomplishing the 2 goals that we talked about earlier, which is like demonstrating that we're qualified and making them like us, right? If we've accomplished that, then we can get the other 2 things that we asked, that we came for, really, which is, 1, ideally you want them to refer you, but you're not going to like straight up explicitly ask them for the referral, because that's horrible etiquette. And also, if you straight up ask them for it, they're probably like, you don't know if they're telling you the truth, because they might just be saying, oh yeah, sure, because, you know, they feel awkward and they don't want to reject you on the spot, even though they don't mean it, right? That's the worst thing that could happen, because then you're misled and you think that you have a referral when you actually don't, right? So you want them to proactively offer it to you, which takes some skill. And then the second thing, besides the actual referral from them, is obviously like, hey, like you want them to help you expand your network, set you up with other people, and help you, you know, get in touch with even more bankers, right? So that you can kind of like multiply the number of people that you're talking to, right? So hopefully that makes sense, okay? But that's a high level, like the ideas framework, right? It's IDEAS, okay? It's how you, that's the acronym that we came up with to make it easy to remember, okay? So those are the only questions that I see. Let me refresh my browser real quick to make sure that there are no other questions. But if anyone else has any last minute questions, I could probably answer one more before I have to run. My wife is waiting for me to eat dinner with her. So let me just check here to make sure that I covered everyone. So looks like we're good here on YouTube. Okay. On Facebook. Okay, I think we're good over there. On LinkedIn. Okay, I don't see any questions. So guys, if there are no more questions, then we'll wrap up here, and we'll actually be back next week, same time, with a different training for you guys. So we do this once a week on Tuesday evening. So make sure you tune in for that if you want to. But otherwise, again, like I said, if you found this to be helpful, if you want to work with us more closely, or if you just have questions about recruiting in general and you need some help, you need someone to someone who's done this hundreds of times before to like just point you in the right direction, reach out to our team. Schedule a free strategy session. It's like completely free. Get on the phone with you for 45 minutes. we'll like learn more about your situation, figure out what your goals are, understand how much time you have left, what are the challenges that you're trying to overcome, and then like it's just like going to doctors. And you get sick, you go to doctors. Like we're recruiting, you come to us, like we can prescribe something for you, right? And what we prescribe is going to be different for every single person because it just depends on like what you have going on. But we don't know what that's going to be unless we talk with you one-on-one, right? So again, that's completely free. There's no obligation. Of course, after you talk to us, if you want to work with us more closely and you like what you see, you like what you hear, we're happy to work with you as long as we think you're a good fit for our program. We don't work with everyone. It is very selective. And that's why in the last 3 years or so, we've only worked with like I said, a little over 350 people, right? So that's not a lot of people out there, right? But that's also by design because, we don't want too many people to know like all the things that we're doing because investment banking is very selective and there are very few jobs that are available out there. Like I said, Goldman hired less than 500 people last year, right? Now, obviously that's just one firm, but in an entire year, across all of Wall Street, we're talking about thousands of jobs, not like tens of thousands of jobs, right? So we do try to keep our group pretty small so that, it's still a competitive advantage. But if that's what you're looking for, then, hey, this might be perfect for you, right? So anyway, that'll be it for today, guys. For those of you that are still on, thank you for staying on until the end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and I'll be back next week with another free training for you guys. All right, talk soon. Bye.